Stories are the most powerful thing on earth. They are literally life and death. Wars are waged based on the story of who is the hero and who is the villain. You are the result of a story your parents told each other, the one-night stand, the soulmate, and friends who became so much more. Life and death. So wouldn't you like to understand them better, these stories? How Story Works, an elegant guide to the craft of storytelling by Lani Diane Rich, demystifies stories and helps you understand why you love what you love, why you hate what you hate, and why prologues are almost always a bad idea. How Story Works by Lani Diane Rich. Available on Amazon in ebook, audiobook, and paperback form. Get your copy today.
Welcome to Still Pretty, a Buffy the Vampire Slayer podcast from Chipperish Media. I'm story expert who can still make Buffy see cartoon birdies around her head, Lani Diane Rich.
And I'm film scholar who called dibs on the last meatball mozzarella flavored Hot Pocket in the freezer, Noelle LaCroix. And we're here today to talk about Empty Places, the 19th episode of season 7. Empty Places aired on April 29th, 2003, and was written by Drew Z. Greenberg and directed by James A. Cotner.
Still Pretty is a fully spoiled, full-spectrum Buffy podcast, so if you haven't seen all of the show, go take care of that, and we'll stop and pick up some burgers or something. You know, road trip food.
It's not a road trip. It's a covert operation. Let's go on patrol. In Empty Places, the residents of Sunnydale are causing traffic jams as they get the hell out of Dodge. Clem promises he'll come back for drinks when Buffy saves the world. He suggests that she skip town like the rest of them, but that's not Buffy's style. Willow and Giles brain control a cop for information on Caleb, saying they're investigators from Interpol. He doesn't give them much, but when they leave, 2 more cops come up and say there's a fugitive that's just shown up in Sunnydale.
Sounds like a situation that needs some justice.
At the hospital, Buffy and Willow visit Xander. Buffy grabs Willow's research on Caleb and skips out, much to Willow and Xander's disappointment. Back at the house, Anya and Andrew try to train the Potentials to kill the Ubervamps, but the Potentials are not feeling terribly hopeful about their chances in this apocalypse. Buffy comes home but doesn't want to answer questions about Xander, so she hands the packet Willow and Giles got off the police to the Potentials to paw through.
Try to find anything that looks like Caleb. His church, his ring. His ability to render a Slayer useless in just one punch.
Kennedy apologizes, but Buffy says it's okay, then goes off to the high school to get her things, since school is canceled now. Caleb is there waiting for her. He taunts her a bit and asks after Xander before attacking and tossing Buffy through a window and leaving her there on the floor.
I'll see you soon, little lady.
Back at Summer Central, Dawn has made some possible connections to Caleb in the paperwork, finding a mission that has been abandoned for a while, which has the mark from Caleb's ring on the wall. Giles sends for Spike.
I have a mission for you.
Oh, really? Because, sometimes our missions end up with you trying to kill me.
Giles sends Spike out to check on the mission and tells Andrew to go with him. Meanwhile, Faith decides that the Potentials need to burn off some energy and takes them to the Bronze to dance the stress away. Buffy comes back to find Giles in the dining room. He tells her he sent Spike away with Andrew, and Buffy is not pleased. They argue for a minute, but Buffy walks away and asks where Faith and the girls are. Giles says they went to the Bronze, and Buffy leaves. Caleb returns to First Buffy and tells them that the trap has been set, and Buffy's going to walk right into it. Meanwhile, back at the Bronze...
This is so cool. Buffy would never let us do this.
At the Bronze, the cops catch up with Faith, but she's not interested in going back to jail, and for a Slayer, that's an option. Unfortunately, all the cops have hellmouthitis, and one of them pulls out a shotgun, and geez, that escalated quickly. Faith goes with them, struggling a little, but only until they get outside, where she decks one of them and then the rest pull their guns on her. She fights while the Potentials take down the cop left behind to keep everyone inside. Buffy walks in at the end of the action as Faith takes down the last dirty cop and the Potentials come out from the bar. Buffy sends the girls home and stays to yell at Faith for not keeping the girls safe.
How safe were they when you dragged them off to meet Caleb? How safe was Rona or Amanda or Molly?
Back at the house, Robin shows up for the meeting Buffy's called and stops to talk to Faith on the porch. They spar verbally for a moment, and then Xander comes home from the hospital. Faith walks away. Meanwhile, Andrew and Spike arrive at the mission and are set upon by attack monks. One of them has the mark from Caleb's ring burned into his face. Spike tries to talk to him, asking for his help fighting Caleb. The monk shows them a secret room that Caleb found, where he found an ancient inscription he didn't like and burned the monk, who ran and hid while Caleb killed the rest of the monks. Spike reads the inscription.
It is not for thee. It is for her alone to wield.
Back at the house, Buffy presents her plan to the group. They're going to go back to the vineyard. She realized that Caleb's making all this noise about the high school and the seal, but that's not where he's camped. The real power is at the vineyard, and she wants to go. The rest of the group doesn't agree, and everyone argues, with no one taking Buffy's side. They accuse her of being reckless, and Kennedy suggests that maybe Faith should be in charge now. Buffy argues, but one by one, Buffy's friends all turn on her. Faith, Giles, Willow, Anya, Xander. But worst of all, Dawn.
I can't stay here and watch her lead you into some disaster.
And you can't stay here.
Buffy goes out the front door and Faith follows, saying she doesn't want this. But that's not the conversation that Buffy is interested in having.
Whether you wanted it or not, their lives are yours. It's only gonna get harder. Protect them. Lead them.
All right, Noelle. So here we are, Empty Places, one of the most notoriously hated episodes in all of Buffy for probably a number of reasons. There are some things in here that I think are good. We're going to get to that. But I was curious about what your response was to this episode.
I find this episode pretty unremarkable, which is confusing to me because it should be really powerful, especially with that ending. But the whole thing really just leaves me feeling kind of meh.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that because I think that narratively what they're trying to do is to bring in this dark moment for Buffy. That is a very, very cool thing. That is a great idea. And we end on this huge punch. But the sacrifices of character that we made in order to get there kind of fumble that moment. So it's just like not as powerful as it could have been.
It feels like it comes kind of out of nowhere. Too like I don't know, we'll get there when we get there, but I'm just sort of like, really?
yeah it's always felt off to me. But yeah, one of the things I wanted to start talking about though, that I really do like about this episode, which of course started in the previous episode, is Xander's eye. Is the we're finally having real, lasting, irreversible consequence for all of these fights and all of this danger that we're always going through. I mean, through 7 seasons, almost the entire run of Buffy, like very few people, especially in our core group of Scoobies, get permanently, irretrievably hurt. I mean, at the end of every episode, if one of our main cast has been, I don't know, turned into a demon or a cave girl or a copy of themselves, we always return back to ones at the end. We always reset and everything is okay. Not much is ever irretrievably lost aside from Joyce and Tara. I mean, even Angel comes back from the dead /evil/hell, quite a few times. I mean, Buffy died twice, like nothing is really, really permanent. But finally, we're doing something here with Xander. He lost an eye and we're sticking with that. Like it's gone, and we need to deal with that. And that makes for, I think, some really good storytelling to have actual real consequence, within the story, I think is really good. In our storytelling in general, also, we very rarely have a disability on screen unless it's turned into some kind of daredevilish superpower, So I kind of like that we have somebody who has experienced a physical disability and we are allowing that to just be, Culturally, I think we fear disability more than maybe death, we will tell stories about death all the time. We're obsessed with death, in a lot of ways. We don't like to talk about it in our real lives, but in our stories, we'll talk about it, but disability, we usually don't touch unless we're going to immediately fix it, turn it around and make somebody quote unquote whole, or we'll mine inspiration from it, do the daredevil thing where we make it the source of a superpower. We don't want to look at disability or deal with it or realize that people can still be completely whole, even if something has gone wrong with their physical body. So, I mean, I like this, it's both real consequence and also a visibility of human experience that we often don't look at.
Yeah. Disability for heroes, I think, is the difference, right? Because disability shows up all the time for villains, and it's always the explanation for why this person is the way they are, why they're so evil, or why, whatever.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me about Xander and his eye is that Xander is the only one in the group who is just human. Right? I mean, Dawn is mystical. Buffy is mystical. Willow is hella mystical. I mean, everybody's got, Anya, everybody has something that makes them special or magical in this otherworldly kind of way.
Right.
And Xander is just a guy. So there's almost this extra weight to this injury for Xander because he's not physically remarkable. It hits harder, or at least it's supposed to. It's definitely set up that way.
Yeah.
It definitely has a weight, I think, that a lot of the other illness and injury on the show does not have. At least I don't remember us making a big deal out of illness or injury in that way before. Maybe Tara, when Glory brain zaps
for a few
her.
episodes, but then we of course reverse that, right? Because we don't want to live with that,
right? And Tara is still magical. There's still she still has that connection to magic that Xander doesn't.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting, I think it's interesting and noteworthy how weighty that loss feels, maybe in part because Xander is so mundane, and that is kind of the point of Xander, that he is so mundane. Which I say with no judgment. I mean, he himself makes the joke about, when there's a party at this house, I usually have to fix something. Right. That's his role.
That's his superpower.
Rooted in mundanity. I mean, sure.
And Andrew appreciates the level of his skill, in fixing all of those windows and making them look just seamless. Which I quite like, is that he has capability. He has real capability and like a real use, but it is very, very anchored in the mundane. And to see him as a, heroic figure as part of our core group of heroes, and that he is able to, to have this experience, that we run through this experience with him, that we allow him to, through the next 3 episodes, but still, that we allow him to maintain it. We don't reverse it. We don't try to make it, we don't give him a glass eye and say it's going to be just fine. We let this sit. We let ourselves live with a permanent injury that comes from this kind of activity, which I think is a good thing. Like, I like having that. It gives the story weight. It is one of the things that I actually really like about season 7, is that we are kind of playing for keeps in a way that I think that previously we have not. One of the things I also, I like it in concept. I don't like it in execution. Like, story-wise, is this dark moment for Buffy. We have this dark moment, which is coming at the right time if you're talking about the season arc, right before the climax. There's this dark moment, and it feels like all is lost, like everything has fallen apart. And from that, we see our hero pull up, they find resources within themselves that we didn't know that they had, that they didn't know that they had. And then they end up having, victory, and it just makes that victory so much sweeter because it was so hard to get, because it required so much. And because there is, in a good dark moment, also real loss that comes along with that victory, that it's not just a clean, easy sweep. And this, I think, is why so many stories have dark moments, The problem here is that in order to create that dark moment, we have sacrificed our characters almost to a one, I think, maybe except for Faith. And that cost, especially with Dawn, where it doesn't even feel like that is actually Dawn, it's just too high a cost. We're paying too high a cost for this dark moment, and that undercuts the power of that dark moment. If we found a way to make this happen while not sacrificing who our characters are and the relationship that they have with Buffy and all of that, like if there was a real reason for it, it might make more sense. But to me, it doesn't work.
It doesn't work for me either, but it doesn't work for me in a different way.
Okay.
It doesn't work for me because I think the end of this episode is supposed to be devastating. Mm-hmm. Or at least it's supposed to be a big emotional blow as the camera follows Buffy out of the house. Like, we're supposed to be with her. We're supposed to feel her loss or betrayal or whatever. But I'm not sure that the emotional setup is there. I end the episode wishing that we had shifted the focus to Faith.
Oh.
And I can't figure out if this is a television production thing or just a me thing. I can't, because I don't know. I start this episode. We're watching Buffy in downtown Sunnydale, pointedly walking into the center of town against the flow of traffic, right? She's the loner. She's doing the opposite, blah, blah, blah. And the feeling that I get from all of this is detachment. It's not so much, Fleetwood Mac's Go Your Own Way blaring in the background as it is me wanting to nudge Buffy and tell her to pay attention to the people around her. She visits Xander and Willow in the hospital, but it's all thanks for the file of info. Bye. Like, she's not going to stay and play card games or even chat. She doesn't seem particularly invested in them and their experience and what's going on. And Willow and Xander are noticeably disappointed. I mean, Willow in particular, it was like, she's like, oh, we were going to hang out. Like, we were going to attend to the loss of, this moment. We were going to address this as an emotional moment. And Buffy's, all business, bye, see you later. And
all shut down.
Yeah. She's so shut down. She's so detached. And then she arrives back at the house, and Dawn naturally wants to know how Xander's doing, what the prognosis is, what the doctor said, on and on and on. And Buffy is completely shut off from any of that. She doesn't even acknowledge that Dawn is worried about Xander. It's all, here's the file, here's the info, here's what we know. So then later, when Faith confronts Buffy about not caring about the potential's feelings or learning their names, I'm completely with Faith. And what I find fascinating is that Buffy refuses whatever magical darkness impregnation the first Watchers want to do to her, because taking that into herself would mean losing some of her humanity. That's the explanation she gives. But her focus on the mission seems to be separating her from her humanity anyway.
Right.
So is this we were doomed all along? You were going to lose your humanity because of the magical darkness that the Shadow Men put in you, or you're going to lose your humanity because you detach from everyone in the name of the mission? I mean, Buffy explains what she's doing to the group and takes for granted that leadership is incompatible with thinking about others' feelings. And that is some toxic bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, once again, we've set up this emotional weight on Buffy, and I think we're supposed to feel bad for her, or at least feel with her. But by the time that confrontation with the group comes around, I'm just relieved. I'm relieved that we're talking about everybody else's feelings in this and what's going on. Which is not to say that confrontation is great. I don't think it is.
Yeah.
I think Willow in particular is slightly off base. It doesn't strike me as a judgment issue with Buffy so much as an empathy issue. Because Buffy is expecting people to follow her without any consideration for them and their needs. And that is not how you lead. I mean, it's certainly not how you lead well. I think people do try to lead that way. Being the Slayer is it's a thing, but it doesn't give you the skill set to be the boss.
Right.
And Buffy, I think everybody's right when they say, look, just because you're the Slayer doesn't mean you know how to do this.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I get the sense from the show, from the way this is set up and from the way it's shot and what the music is doing and all of that, that I'm supposed to feel like, oh, this is a huge blow to Buffy. This is a betrayal. And I'm like, actually, y'all have a point. You know, Giles is like, she's like, why did you make this decision without me? And he's like, you were not here. Like, decisions have to be made. So I don't know. I mean, so like I say, I don't know if this is a storytelling misstep or if this is just a me and what I'm, you know, file under like what my brain notices. But I'm just like, oh, thank God we're talking about, you know, Buffy is not super qualified to be doing what she thinks she's doing. Like, she talks about leading the group, but I don't see her being a leader at all, really.
Well, she went to the Full Metal Jacket, right, school of leadership. You know, toughen them up, be mean, be hard, you know, all of those things. And yeah, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think you're definitely onto something. I think also the idea that Buffy wants this, like part of this betrayal, this whole setup is the idea that Buffy desperately wants to be the leader of these people. When in reality, after Xander gets hurt, after all of this happens, like, I would have rather seen Buffy quit, right? That Buffy is like, there's another Slayer here. I can't handle all of this. This is too much for me. Xander could have been killed. You know, he lost his eye. Real shit is happening. You know, and that maybe like the questions that they have that are legitimate. If Buffy lost her confidence and had a crisis of confidence here, that is another kind of dark moment that structurally would work really, really well. And her finding her confidence again, her leaving and saying, I give up, because hasn't she for all of these years been like, I am the one, I am the Slayer. There's nobody else to do it. Faith, you know, has lost her connection and is not reliable for it. I can't rely on her. I can't let her do stuff. I have to do this. Imagine doing a job that you hated that much for 7 years and then something gets seriously fucked up and then you see somebody who you think may be able to handle it. I mean, wouldn't there be that desire to just pass that on, you know? And then when we have Faith in this circumstance, who's like, this isn't, you know, like, I'm not ready for this either, you know? Then you see how heavy the head is that wears the crown, you know, how difficult all of that is, but we see it through another perspective. So I think that you're absolutely right. I think all of this is contingent upon that we agree with the way that Buffy's been doing things. I think textually we're supposed to see Buffy when she comes in and she's like, I got a plan. Let's run back in there. And everybody's like, no, you know, that's the plan she comes back with, right? You know, after she's had a crisis of confidence, after she's left, you know, when she goes back to save them, which is coming up, of course, in the next episode. I think that we need to have that moment, I think, be Buffy generated rather than externally generated. And the thing is that even with that, like, yeah, there are some points here, but also there's just a lot of stuff that just doesn't feel like these characters. I mean, Giles turned on Buffy and betrayed Buffy trying to kill Spike. And yeah, he's right about decisions need to be made. And no, I'm not sending Spike off to die, you know, but also like when he betrayed her and Helpless, he was sorry and he worked to earn back her trust. Like this asshole that Giles is in season 7 is just useless. He's just there to betray her. And that is all he does. That is not who Giles has been, you know, traditionally throughout this story. Willow just sits there. She doesn't actively betray Buffy aside from saying she won't defend her, but she doesn't stop anything. And that's also not Willow. You know, it's weak and Willow is not weak. She's a lot of things. Weak is not one of them. Anya's whole speech. Since when did Anya give a fuck about anything but Anya? Like, for her perspective, if Buffy gets killed, one of these other potentials is going to become the Slayer, and then that Slayer will protect her. And I think she would be like, it's not my ass on the line. Sort it out yourselves and just sit there and eat a cracker. This "you're not better than us" is like an interesting argument. I think would have come better from maybe one of the potentials. But it's not an Anya argument.
Yeah. I actually really like that speech, but not from Anya.
Yes.
It's like, why is Anya suddenly so invested?
You're not better than us. You're luckier than us. Since when does she think that being the Slayer is a lucky thing? Sharp, sharp knives, brutal death.
Yeah.
Like, that's not lucky.
Yeah.
From Anya's perspective, that's not lucky. She is there to be protected. And if Buffy dies, she kind of likes Buffy or whatever. But another Slayer will rise to take care of her, who is already in the house. And, is one of these girls.
Yeah.
So, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, as far as she's concerned. Then we've got Xander. He lost his eye. He's experiencing hurt and trauma. I don't find his response really out of line. It's just kind of not like Xander. Like, Buffy is his hero. And I think the response to something like this is going to, can come from a number of spaces. Either he's going to feel like this is Buffy's fault, maybe blame her for putting him in danger. But we just had that speech from him, like last night, where he was like, you got to believe in Buffy. You got to know she cares about you. And bad things can happen. Bad things can happen. Xander went into that fight. Xander is a grown ass man going into that fight. The fact that he lost his eye, I don't think Xander would see that as Buffy's fault. So, I don't see this necessarily as like, a serious break of Xander's character, but just not terribly consistent, But Dawn, she's the worst of all of it. She's the one who kicks Buffy out of the house. It's my house too. I mean, are you kidding? She says this to the sister who literally died to save her and has rescued her over and over and over again, and whose death she experienced for, what was it, 168 days, 167 days, 168 tomorrow.
Yeah,
right?
whatever it was.
She knows what it's like to live without Buffy, and she doesn't want that. So I think that like Dawn's betrayal is probably the most out of character. Faith, I think, is perfectly aligned. Like, Faith is right. This is absolutely, Faith would be like, I don't want this. I just want to have a discussion, which I think is completely reasonable.
Yeah.
And being in charge is something that Faith is not necessarily wanting to do. She just wants to be there in the fight. And she's like, she doesn't mind scrapping, but she wants to know why she's scrapping, which I think is a completely reasonable request. And Rona, I really understand. I mean, she's a kid. She came there for protection, not to fight. And she feels let down by Buffy and forced into a space she's not prepared for, in which she's, watched kind of a few of her friends die. What is she, 17? That's not easy, I think she is the best drawn of the potentials. But I hate that ding dong, the witch is dead thing. And then Dawn snaps at her. Like, Rona is business, like Rona is the one who is got her feet on the ground and she's looking around her and she's analyzing the situation and seeing that this is not cool, but she doesn't have that gloater kind of mean girl thing to her. And so to have her do that and then have Dawn snap at her like that, did not care for that. Like, all of that just felt off. So for me, like, the cost of this dark moment comes with this breaking of a lot of characters, many of whom are long-term and beloved. And it just feels forced and wrong to me.
Yeah, it makes me feel like I missed something in the middle. It makes me feel like there's a whole emotional journey that we need to go on with all of these people. Because I think if we wanted to get here with everybody, we could. But I think that hurt needs to be built up and expressed more than it is.
It's rushed.
Yeah. Well, and I guess that's one of the drawbacks to having so many characters. because there are a ton of people here.
I mean, did you see that living room?
Oh my God, I actually love it.
That
I
was
love
like
it.
30 people.
Yeah.
They are violating code.
Yeah,
I am certain with the number of people living in that house.
Yeah, it's the problem.
Yeah.
But we needed to go on more of that emotional journey with everybody, I think.
Yeah.
Rather than take for granted that this is going on behind the
Buffy
scenes,
quit.
apparently.
We have been building Buffy wanting to quit for 7 years. Prophecy girl. I quit.
Yeah.
I'm 16. I
Yeah.
don't want to die. Right?
Yeah.
Here, I'm 22. I am not prepared to lead. Like,
Yeah.
had we done that as a bookend thematically to Prophecy Girl at the end of season 7, I think that would have tied up a lot of kind of movement in Buffy's character that we have been experiencing all the way through.
Yeah.
Buffy never wanted this. It doesn't make you better than us. It makes you luckier than us. And Buffy's like, lucky?
Yeah.
Shall we go through the litany of bullshit that I have experienced because of this? You know, like for one of the potentials to call her lucky and for her to be like, that's it. That's the end of this.
Yeah.
This is not
like,
lucky,
listen,
you
that's
know?
what you think this is about? Absolutely
Exactly.
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that there's an unexplored piece of Buffy's leadership arc that I alluded to it a little bit last week when Caleb kills a couple of the potentials. And, you know, so we've talked about Xander's eye. This is, you know, this permanent damage that's happened because of this plan. Well, also a couple of the potentials died.
Yeah.
And Buffy had been saying all along, you know, some of us are going to die and we have to be willing to, you know, accept that and whatnot. But then if we had turned around and had her grapple with the real, you know, like, oh shit.
Yeah.
Like I was telling the truth when I said some of us are going to die. Some of us are not going to come back from this. That like almost the emotional toll of being in that role on her, like, I think we could have explored that more too.
Yeah.
You know, it's one thing to say, like, we have to be strong and we have to fight and we have to understand that not all of us are going to make it out alive. But then to make the plan go charging in and have that be the case that some of us don't make it out. Oh, shit's getting really real now.
Exactly. Like there's so much opportunity here and there's so much that has been built up for years and years and years for you to kind of play on, that to create this huge betrayal, it just feels cheap and unearned.
Yeah, it's like they wanted to do this moment this way and then wrote it in rather than you know, like,
but you're also
like, oh, wouldn't it be devastating if everyone turned on Buffy and kicked her out? And it's like, well, maybe, but you got to set it up differently.
Well, and also the thing is that what you're doing is you're putting your protagonist once again, which we've been doing a lot with Buffy over the last 2 seasons, in this passive space, right? Instead of Buffy making this choice and being like, you guys are better off without me. I need to leave. I cannot be responsible for another death. I just can't do it, right? You can completely understand that crisis of confidence, that sense that you are not prepared for the task with which you have been presented, you know? And I think that most of us can really sympathize with that position where you just feel like you're being asked to do something that you are not prepared to do. And the consequences of that are the deaths of kids. You know, young girls who are like her, you know, when she was 15 years old and doing the Lolita nonsense for Angel, you know. But, you know, I think that the passivity, the victim, you know, like situation with Buffy, where this is not something that she is doing. This is something that is happening to her. I think is a mistake. You want your protagonist to make these choices. Choices define what characters are, what they do within a story. Choices are everything. And for Buffy to do this without a choice, you know, is something that I think kind of deflates a lot of the momentum that you've had building up in this season. I want her to quit. She tried to quit before. She couldn't quit. Now she's going to fucking quit. And that's it. And I want her to feel relief. I mean, and then of course, as we're going to see, have the conversation with Spike and then realize, what has to be done, all of that kind of stuff, and return to leadership, knowing that she can do it, knowing that she knows now how to do it. I think that would have been a really good story. It's not the story that we get. One of the stories that we do get, though, which I absolutely love, is that we actually get a feminine redemption arc, which does not happen a lot. It is very rare to see a female character who is allowed to be fully flawed, and yet survive long enough to be redeemed. I mean, this happens with men all the time. We cannot get enough of like a Tony Soprano or a Walter White or whatever. But this doesn't generally happen with women. Women are either good and perfect and allowed to live as long as they live within the rules and do what they're told. Or if they are not, the cost of not being perfect and pure is traditionally, like death. Like, often like that's what gets a female character killed. But Faith actually gets a redemption arc. I mean, we don't get to see it happen because she's just absent in prison and we kind of forget that she exists during most of this time. But she's pulled, back through Angel Town into Buffyville, and now here she is, she's here with full recognition of what she is while still being allowed to be sex positive, ready to party. She knows what she's done. She's willing to atone, but she's not laying down and letting anyone kick the shit out of her. She's not kicking the shit out of herself for what she's done. She's not pure by the patriarchal purity standard that's set out for women culturally, which is often what we make female characters live to. I sometimes crave a non-fat yogurt after, right? And yet she is allowed to both live and be heroic. And it's fucking subversive, and I love it. I mean, Buffy as a character is not that feminist, but I would argue that Faith really is. I mean, she's able to pull for the good guys now without losing her grit, her attitude, her intelligence, or her autonomy. This is an incredibly rare thing. And it's just one reason why Faith is an amazing character, but I love that we get this.
My favorite bit of Faith in this episode is when Buffy is trying to argue with her and she says, "You have no idea what I'm feeling." And I'm like, oh, hell yes. Like Faith advocating for herself in all of this, and just like,
yes,
the points that Faith is able to make to Buffy are really excellent. Really, really excellent. You cannot just wail on these girls. You have to take care of them as well.
Yeah. Learn their names.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, it's so biting, but it's so true. I mean,
it's a good cut.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very, very true. And I love her, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Like, she knows she's not a leader, but she's going to do the best with what she's got in the moment, without the certainty that Buffy seems to have. Faith is excellent. Faith is excellent.
I love it.
And I mean, she's not without her problems, but she gets to do a lot because she doesn't occupy that protagonist space, I think.
Right.
She doesn't have to be the titular character. Although I would watch Faith the Vampire Slayer. I would
my
watch
God,
the
would
shit
I
out of
watch
that
that
show.
Would I watch that? I'm very sad that we missed her redemption arc. I would have loved if we had gone through that experience with her the way that we do with Angel all the time, the way that we do with Spike, walking deeply through that redemption arc would have been really, really nice. We don't get that. But I love what we get. Like the fact that we have a woman who is allowed to be all of the things that Faith is, and be allowed to live and be redeemed. Like, I just, I'm trying to think of and there are other examples out there, especially more recently. We've had more of these stories, but for a long time, like, we just don't get those stories. A woman fucks up or, goes the wrong way and she dies. Like last night I watched Thelma and Louise. And there you go, right? They disobeyed and they died for it, and that's just how that works.
But they, and it's, that's another interesting conversation.
That's a whole other discussion.
There's a whole other discussion. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's semi-related to, what I was talking about with Faith last time about, written by a man-itis of like, yeah, but with Thelma and Louise, like they die, but it's empowering. And you're like, ooh, like, I don't know.
No.
I don't know.
I
Like,
don't think that is. Also, Thelma and Louise was written by a woman. Directed by men. Produced by men.
Yeah.
Very heavily influenced by men. But at least written by a woman. So there's something.
It's a very masculine story, I think, in the way that Faith's story is a very masculine story. But that's, that's, cultural studies PhD. No,
exactly. It's a first step. I dig it. I'm just saying. I just dig it.
Yeah.
We also get a lot of.
For the record, I love Thelma and Louise. That movie fucking rocks.
I do too. I really enjoyed Thelma and Louise. It was very, very interesting watching it last night and then coming in and kind of looking at Faith's feminine redemption. That she is allowed to both fuck up and live.
Yeah.
Which is something that we don't get a lot with women who make
hell.
those.
The bar is in hell if that's that's like what we're celebrating. That like, oh, you made a mistake and you didn't have to die about it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? You get met where you are, right?
Yeah.
That's where we start making that climb.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, and that's why breaking it down is so much fun when you realize, oh, yeah, actually.
That these are the cultural stories that we are told about ourselves.
Yeah.
The fact that she doesn't die is kind of awesome. And really, subversive, especially for, this time period.
Yeah.
One of the things too that I actually do like about this episode are the fun little pairings that we get.
Yeah, which might just be a television storytelling thing, as in we have a ton of characters and only so much time. But this episode seems to work on the buddy system.
Right.
Which is something about it that I actually do appreciate. I mean, Willow and Xander cope with Xander's injury, and they have this, like, it feels like a very lovely, I almost want to say old school Willow and Xander moment.
Yeah.
Where they're talking in the hospital, and Willow's voice is suddenly like season 1 Willow. She's got this like lilty, sort of high, sweet, like we're going back to the softer side of Sears. And I'm like, there's something really heartbreaking just in that performance.
Yeah.
And then they're trying to go back and forth and, be silly together. And they just finally, Xander's just like, oh, like, please don't. Like, we can't keep going like this. It's really, that is a lovely emotional beat in this episode that for me is very emotionally muddy. And then we have Giles and Dawn as team research.
Yep.
Which I appreciate. Here's Dawn doing the thing that we love Dawn doing so much, holding her own. Giles is like, this has nothing to do with anything. Why is this even in the file? And Dawn is like, exactly.
Oh my God. I love Dawn as research girl.
Yeah, you stand up to, Mr. Giles' Captain Research hat. Like, well done. And she's absolutely correct. And then, of course, Faith and Robin Wood get to meet. And they seem pretty well matched. And Mr. Contner comes this close to putting little cartoon hearts in Wood's eyes. I mean, good Lord. Good Lord, that shot. I'm like, all right. Very dreamy. But I like seeing them together. And I like the way they talk about what's going on without really talking about what's going on, which feels genuine to me and also feels very in character for both of them. These are people who talk around the issue without discussing it.
Yes.
And then my favorite couple. What is it that the kids say? The one true pairing?
Right.
Spike and
OTP,
Andrew.
Yeah.
Spike and Andrew bonding over deep fried onions. I mean, come on. Like, come on. Honestly.
Andrew and food. There's a whole thesis to be written about Andrew and food and the nourishment of food and what that does.
I've been talking about Spike and food since what, like season 2?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Spike and food. Spike likes being in the world because that's where his stuff is, including food. You know, he likes it.
Yeah.
It's great. Spike and food, Andrew and food. There's a whole thing. There's a whole thesis to be written about this show and food.
There is.
And feeding and eating and that's a whole other thing. But I love those two. I love Spike and Andrew together.
Yeah, they're very, very fun.
And I mean, unsurprisingly, Buffy doesn't have a buddy.
Yeah. Aww,
you know,
Buffy.
If
to be the Slayer is to always be alone, right? Yeah.
I mean, if she saves the world, when she saves the world, it'll be Clem.
Right.
But until then, she's stuck with Caleb, apparently. Just interesting. I mean, file under things they almost certainly didn't do on purpose, but Noelle can't stop thinking about. Buffy is suddenly all about the mission, and Caleb is tied to California missions. Again, accidental homophone that probably means nothing, but there's something, I don't know. There's more of a parallel between them maybe than they want or that the show. And of course, he's talking to the first as Buffy.
Yeah, which is a whole other thing.
That's a whole other thing. That's a whole other thing. Especially since he hates women. Like, he hates women, but he is into the first looking like a woman. Does that ever get addressed? I don't remember.
I don't know that it does.
I don't think it does. I think we just sort of take for granted that the first is Buffy to Caleb, but Caleb hates women. Like, that's his whole jam. So,
well, yeah, and for most of the relationship, because we see when he first shows up that the first presents as Buffy as a gift, that up until that point, the first had not presented as Buffy to him. So this is like a new, the presentation as Buffy is a reward. You know, it's an achievement badge, I think, for Caleb. And he is into that. And the thing is that, you know, my experience with misogynists is generally that, yes, they hate women, but they really, really like to interact with them. Because it gives them a way to kind of to vent their hatred and anger and whatever. It's
activating. It's activating to be around the thing that you hate.
It's very, very complicated. I love these pairings too. I love Faith and Robin Wood is one of my favorite things. I cannot believe, Eliza Dushku has so much chemistry with everyone.
Oh, yeah.
Like, she would have chemistry with a wooden stump, you know, like there's just something about her that she had incredible chemistry with Buffy. She had wonderful chemistry with the mayor. She's got great chemistry with Robin Wood. You know, she's got great chemistry with like everybody. I can't remember anybody that Faith has been on screen with. That this actress has been on screen with that she hasn't had amazing chemistry with. When she was torturing Wesley over on Angel, they had amazing chemistry. Like, it's nuts. But you have her in this, you know, quick, like, I don't know, 2 minutes with Robin Wood.
Yeah,
and at the end of it, I'm like, oh, you two need to bang that out like bad, you know? And of course, we're going to get to that. But I love that. I think it's so beautifully done. And Eliza is so great in this role. She reminds me a little bit, not in the specifics of the way that she acts, but in her ability to pull almost anything off that she is given. She reminds me of Juliet Landau in that way. Like, Juliet Landau as Drew can do, like, I am convinced anything they give her, Juliet Landau can pull it off. And Eliza Dushku, I think, is a very similar kind of actor.
That stuff that when you think about on the page, this could have gone any direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
but this actor pulled it off.
I think that's very true. Yeah.
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 And Spike and Andrew, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, I think that one of the show's greatest strengths is the actors.
Oh,
I don't know that this show would have worked if it were not for a lot of these performers, and specifically, I mean, young performers. Like, these are young people. These are young actors, and they do an incredible job.
Yeah, they really do.
With what they're given, even when it's not a whole lot.
Yeah, I mean, they really are able to pull it off. And back to Spike and Andrew as a pairing. I love all of this. It is, again, short but delightful. I love that Spike has this love of the blooming onion, down to knowing how it's properly prepared. I love the idea of Spike up late one night just using a laptop he stole and looking up the recipe to try it home. I mean, like, everything that goes into to him, not just like having looked at and knowing, but memorizing it to the point where he's driving on a bike and can actually explain the entire process to Andrew from memory, how the bloomin' onion works. Like, that is a love. I remember you talking about Spike and food and that kind of hedonistic delight that Spike has. And I love that whenever we see that engaged in his character. I love Andrew, like playing along as the bad cop. I love that food is the thing that he uses to connect with Spike. But when he's the bad cop, we see him stumbling through this redemption, relying on these narratives. And of course, Andrew is going to go back to the space in which he is comfortable. And he's screwing it up, but he is, he's trying things on. He's kind of shifting around within this space. And it's really, really fun to see him do it. Like, I just really enjoy those pairs.
Yeah, Andrew doesn't know who he is if there's not a narrative involved. And I love it. I love it. Can't is a 4-letter word. Run is a 3-letter word.
3-letter word. Yeah, he's trying so hard, to be a partner. Be in the partnership. And I think that Andrew works best when he is partnered. Like, he was part of the trio, he is about that group dynamic, about working with people, which I really, really like. Like, I love Andrew as a character. And I think that Tom Lenk, again, as we talk about actors and performance, that whatever Andrew may not have in the writing, Tom Lenk makes up for in the performance.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. We've got a couple of things too that were a little uncomfortable for me. And again, like, I am talking from a place where I am still working through, my own whiteness. So understand that when I talk about these issues of race, that I'm speaking to them from a place that is not necessarily completely informed. But what I see here is we have this moment in the Bronze where one of the potential says, you're going to have to shoot us to stop us. And then the policeman says, that doesn't really bother me. He's holding this rifle. He cocks the gun, and we go immediately to a close up of Rona, the one Black person in this room. And I've seen this episode a lot of times. I didn't clock that focus on the Black woman when a cop makes a threat with a rifle. This time I clocked it, and it chilled my blood. It was just, it hurt, It also isn't great that we open the story with two of our white heroes, Giles and Willow, gaslighting a Black man, And so this is one of those things where, like, I'm still in my process. I'm very much in the muddy middle of trying to figure all of this stuff out. And I am wrong about these issues very, very often. And again, I would like to say it's a cultural thing. The writers, I don't blame the people who write the stories that reflect us back at us. But I do think that we have a responsibility to be like, oh my God, like, that's hurtful and harmful. And I can see that as a person of color, that would be a very shocking, horrible thing. So I just want to acknowledge that it's there, that it was seen, and that, I'd like for us, as we move forward in telling our stories, to have a consciousness of that kind of thing. Because it was really, really uncomfortable. It sucks and it hurts to see it.
Yeah, it's interesting too how much, our new, for many white people, myself included, our new understanding of the relationship between police and violence in general, how much that flavors all of this interaction in this episode with the police, that these cops are presented as having gone off the rails because of, all of the
getting a bad case of hellmouthitis.
Yeah, all of the hellmouth stuff. But, this, isn't this like fantasy space stuff is reality for many, many people and their experience of police, then now. Like, this should feel dated. Like, it really should. The idea of police being, a terrifying force of evil should feel like, I don't know. It is interesting to me that we're clearly supposed to see this as like, these cops have gone off the rails, but it's more, that's a more accurate depiction of what policing is and has been for a very long time.
Yeah, for a long time. And that's, and that's why, like, part of the reason why I really want to talk about these things, and at the very least, call them out to the best of my ability to see them, which is not by any means, extensive. Because like I said, I'm still in the muddy middle of all of that. And I think I will be probably for the rest of my life. But I can see how, like, as a person of color, Buffy could be inaccessible, because of a lot of these things that white people can watch it and maybe not even notice, not even see it, not clock it. But as a person of color, it could be hard. And so one of the reasons why I like to call these things out is because I want to say we acknowledge it. There's stuff in Buffy that I think is valuable. I would like to make that more accessible to more people because I love it and I want to share it. And I don't know if talking about these things makes it more accessible for people who might otherwise feel like this is not made for them. This does not acknowledge their humanity. If the show isn't going to acknowledge that, I would like to try to acknowledge it to the best of my abilities, which is usually pretty weak sauce, but it's what I have, so I'm going to give it. And so that I found just really uncomfortable in the course of this episode. But let's go ahead and move through to our favorite part of Empty Places, which may be a bit of a stretch. Noelle, what did you like the most in this episode?
Well, surprising no one, Spike and Andrew discussing road trip food. I bet even covert operatives eat curly fries. They're really good.
They are really good.
Really
Andrew.
Good. They're really good. Now I want curly fries. Yeah.
I know.
Spike and Andrew forever. Forever. What about you, Lani? What's your favorite part?
Oh, for me, it's another pairing. It is Robin Wood and Faith Lehane, who doesn't get a last name in the show, but I get that from the comics. Her last name is Lehane. Just the chemistry and the hotness of the two of them in a space together, how beautiful they are together, how wonderfully they spar back and forth. An incredibly short scene. And yet by the end of it, I'm like, oh, I ship it so hard. So, I just love it. I love the two of them.
You really, really want him to just like take her back to his vamp attack shack because,
yes,
she would appreciate that. She would appreciate.
Yeah,
I feel like Faith would appreciate the.
I think there'd be
everywhere.
some fun play there, and you know what? Faith deserves a nice evening. Like a good evening, banging all that tension out. Absolutely. And that's gonna happen eventually. This is a spoiled show, so we're gonna get there.
If you enjoyed this conversation and would like to join in, follow @Chipperish on Twitter and use the hashtag #StillPretty. Or as a Patreon supporter at any level, you can join the Chipperish Discord group and chat live with other listeners and the hosts.
Hey, did you guys know we have a new podcast from Chipperish Media? It is called Endless, and it covers the Sandman comics and TV show, hosted by me and DC Comics editor Elisa Whitney. Search for Chipperish Endless in your podcast app of choice. And if you like that stuff at all, it's Neil Gaiman, it's comics, it's amazing. I am absolutely loving this run through Sandman, which I've never read before, but it's freaking amazing. I'm very excited for the TV show. Also, Patreon supporters who chip in at $10 and up get to attend show recordings live live. We have a bunch of people with us here right now who are watching us screw up all the stuff because I always get the scripts wrong because I don't read them. I write them and then I don't read them and make sure that they are actually pronounceable. And everybody who hangs out here gets to see me do that every week. We have live chats before and after the show. So if you haven't pledged your support yet, now is the time.
Speaking of supporters, this episode of Still Pretty was brought to you by the Chipperish media producers who support us on Patreon at the power producer level. These people are the reason why Still Pretty is coming to you free and ad-free right now. So thank you to Abby, Alice, Christina, Erica, Jonathan, Kevin, Kristen, Michael, Rose, Sarah, Shelley, Stephania, and Stephanie. And this week's special message for our power producers: if you save the world, I'll come back. We'll have drinks. When you save the world.
This episode of Still Pretty was edited by Chipperish content editor Jack Cram. Jack, you tell anyone we had this conversation, I'll bite you. We'll be back next time with Touch, the 20th episode of season 7. Until then, it's an onion and it's a flower. I don't understand how such a thing is possible.